Hello, you're watching Inside Politics. I'm Anastasia Lavrina. The situation in Syria has taken a dramatic turn following the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime, leading to significant geopolitical shifts. As various international powers adjust their strategies, including Turkey's increasing involvement, Russia's military presence, and the UK's humanitarian and diplomatic efforts, and Israel's action in the Golan Heights, the region's future remains uncertain. With new developments unfolding rapidly, the role of international actors will be crucial in shaping Syria's path forwards and the broader dynamics of the Middle East. More details in my program today. Joining me now from London is James Sharp, former UK ambassador. From the United States of America, we have Andrei Korobkov, professor of political sciences, Middle Tennessee State University. And from Turkey is Gökçe Hubar, international security analyst. Dear experts, warm welcome to Inside Politics.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Gökçe, if you don't mind, my first question will be to you. With Turkey's reopening its embassy in Syria on Saturday, becoming the first country to do so since the end of Bashar al-Assad's rule last weekend, how do you view the current developments in Syria?
Yeah, thank you. As you said, Turkey is the first country to reopen its embassy, and Turkey from the beginning supported the opposition because always Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, the Turkish president, always supported the opposition movement because Turkey was always aware that Iran's presence for the humanitarian causes. Turkey always supported the opposition's presence in the international arena.
James, given that the UK Home Office website states that according to a 2017 government ruling, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is considered another name for the terrorist group Al-Qaeda, which has been banned since March 2001. How can we reconcile this with the United Kingdom's recent statement that it's ready to engage with a new government in Syria in areas where it's needed?
I think it's just pragmatic politics, quite frankly, pragmatic diplomacy. And I should say here, Anastasia, of course, I don't represent the British government as such. I'm just commentating from a personal perspective. But they say, HTS say that they're no longer affiliated with Al-Qaeda, and they're saying a lot of the right things about inclusivity and a willingness to engage. So if countries want to have any influence whatsoever, then they have to engage, they have to test the water. And I think that's really what it's about, just testing the water to see how cold or see how warm it is. And I think here I'd just say there, it seems a very different situation to the Taliban, because the Taliban were fighting to get Western countries out of Afghanistan, and they clearly didn't want to engage, and they didn't want to talk about inclusivity and things like that. So I think the situation is very different.
That's quite interesting, Andrei. In his first statement since the fall of Damascus 8 days ago, Syria's former president Bashar al-Assad claims he never intended to flee to Russia. What does this reveal about his intentions and the current situation in Syria?
Well, it just emphasizes the same point that we all were making in recent days, that it was totally unexpected, the collapse of the Syrian military, not only for external observers, but also for the regime itself. Speaking of Russia, of course, it's a tremendous reputational loss. It creates very dangerous situation in terms of Russian Navy in the Mediterranean and would lead to some realignment. But you also have to keep in mind two other issues. First, clearly, not only Syria, but the Middle East in general were secondary in terms of Russian strategic interest right now compared to Ukraine. And for the Russian leadership, it would be much easier to make some kind of turnaround and redefine the group that is now in power in Syria compared to the Western governments, for example, for the US that officially declared it to be a terrorist organization. Well, for Russia, of course, such serious changes would be much easier to make. So it's clear that already there is a surge of contacts and search for some middle ground with the new government. Regarding Assad, considering that he represented 10-12% of the population to start with, basically with the loss of military control, he is becoming for the most part irrelevant.
Andrei, one additional question to you. It seems that Moscow is trying to manage the relations with a newly established government in Syria. Do you think that there is a perspectives for that?
Yes, I think yes. We've seen it in Afghanistan, where relatively easily contacts and working relations with the Taliban were established. And here would be the same. Clearly, any government right now in Syria would be forced to balance in between different, both internal and external forces. And Moscow, again, would be viewed as a very important element in such balancing act.
Well, Gökçe, following this statement by Defense Minister that Turkey is ready to offer military training to Syria if requested by the new administration, what implications does this have for Turkey's involvement in Syria's future security landscape?
Yeah, thank you. The new regime promised that their actions would be appropriate with international law and United Nations conventions. And Turkey's interest here, I mean, the National Defense Minister Yaşar Güler offered military training if requested, because Turkey's national security concern is the PKK actually. I mean, the PKK has operatives in Syria, and in their Azor region. Recently, the PKK had an oil income, and recently this region passed from the PKK to the opposition, the Syrian National Army, and Turkey is aware that the new regime can cooperate with Turkish government, and they can prevent a catastrophe like chemical weapons.
Well, James, UK says it will provide $63 million in humanitarian aid for most vulnerable Syrians. How can the UK ensure that humanitarian aid in Syria is not weaponized by local political factions, especially after years of aid being used as a bargaining chip?
Yes, I think $63 million equates to £50 million, which was the latest announcement by the British government. And as I understand it, £20 million of that will go to support Syrian refugees in Jordan and Lebanon, with the other £30 million being channeled through the United Nations and NGOs in Syria itself. And yes, of course, it can be weaponized. And as you say, we saw that last year with the earthquake in northern Syria, where the Assad regime tried to control the inflow of aid and decide who should actually get humanitarian support. So it's always a slight risk. But again, as I say, I think it's just important to recognise that, number one, that this is for people. This is humanitarian aid for disadvantaged and afflicted people. And number two, we have to take them at their word for the time being, see how it goes. And, I think the broader question about economic development assistance, I think that will be, much more conditional upon what stance the new regime takes towards all of the things that the international community has asked for.
James, one more question to you. Alongside the humanitarian announcement, the Foreign Secretary has also set out new funding to support the organization of the prohibition of chemical weapons work in Syria to hold the Syrian regime accountable for its use of chemical weapons. Will the UK's involvement be limited to financial support, or will London, like Washington, also participate in efforts such as the search for chemical weapons in Syria?
Well, obviously, I'm not privy to official information on this, but my guess would be that, initially provide the OPCW with the funding that it needs, and then see how it goes. If they get access and the extent to which they can make an assessment, and if they then say, actually, what we need is not just money, but we need personnel on the ground, then of course I'm sure the UK government and other Western governments will be happy to sort of look at providing those experts.
Andrei, how do you see the future position of Russia? We already talked with you about its weakening position since all of those developments taking place in Syria and the future expectation from the work with the new administration, with the new government. But what do you think will be necessary for Moscow to take into account working with the international community when it comes to the future development of Syria?
We can expect multilateral talks to start in this regard, but Moscow, of course, will be seeking its own goals. First of all, it is, again, the issue of military presence in the region. And in this sense, its goals will, to some extent, contradict those of the other players. We also have to look at the migration. The previous Syrian war has caused second in scale refugee flow to Europe after the current Ukrainian flow. And Russia essentially has refused to take any refugees. Right now, situation is the potential refugees represent not all groups, but also ethnic groups that were part of the Assad regime, including Alawi and Christians. And it is quite possible that Moscow would change its attitude, but considering against the immigration that takes place not only in North America and Europe, but also in Russia, it would be politically very touchy, and this can create additional tensions. So we'll see, but Russia definitely is not planning to leave Syria completely, and it will offer itself as a counterbalance to Western influence to the new government, whatever its real orientation is going to be in the future.
Andrei, how do you think, will Russia keep or lose its military bases in Syria? You are saying that Russia is planning to stay there, then how exactly? Probably there is a strategy on how Russia is planning to keep its military presence in Syria.
It definitely wants to stay. I doubt that it would retain bases, although especially Navy presence is very important for Russia. But it probably would offer training the same way what we just heard from a colleague from Turkey about Turkish potential influence and presence in the new Syria. It will probably act, at least formally, not as a state-backed force, but rely on paramilitary groups like Prigozhin's Wagner before. And it will seek the ways and probably would find the ways to retain its presence in more informal role in the future.
So there is a possibility to see more cooperation in these particular issues between Russia and Turkey, right?
Yes, but it's not only Russia and Turkey, it's practically everybody. We see that France is very aggressively trying to move in. Others would try to do. The new Trump administration after January 20th would also articulate its policies in this regard. We know that Grenell became special representative of the president, of the incoming president in the region. He is known for his aggressive style, and we can expect the beginning of very active and energetic diplomacy by the United States in the region.
That's very interesting, James. We see that our experts is predicting probably more cooperation between Russia and Turkey, and not only, but United Kingdom. We know all of those difficulties, which is now in between of two countries, Russia and United Kingdom, Russia and United States of America. Do you believe that there is a platform for the future, any kind of cooperation between Russia and some Western powers?
Well, if Russia withdraws from Ukraine, then I'm sure the opportunities will increase. But if that doesn't happen, then of course they'll be very, very limited. But I think that, if you look at Syria, for example, there's been some big wins. We've talked, obviously people have concerns about the new regime and whether or not they have changed, if you like. And I think our view there is, well, let's take them at their word. They've said a lot of the right things, so we take them at their word, but verify, trust but verify, if you like. And that's not just our position. I mean, that's the position generally of the international community. And there's been a lot of meetings between Europeans, the US, and the Arab states, the Middle Eastern states, to set out this sort of set of principles as to what we would expect to see if Syria wants some sort of support. And those do involve respect for human rights, a non-sectarian approach, access for aid, humanitarian aid, destruction of chemical weapons. So I think on the face of it, there's quite a lot of unity in the international community as to what should happen next. But look, let's be honest. I mean, what's happened so far has been very, very good news. I mean, getting rid of that evil Assad regime, which was killing its own people, exporting instability, exporting drugs, exporting refugees to other parts of the world. The destruction, if you like, I hope, of Iranian influence, and hopefully now Lebanon will be a safer place. I mean, frankly, from a Western perspective, we would say also the humbling of Russia has been a very, very good thing as well. So if the Russian military are kicked out of Syria, that's got to be a good thing as well. So I think that we would not really regard Russia, to come back to your specific question, I don't think we'd regard Russia as being a valid partner. They were a partner of Assad and doing a lot of the killing on his behalf and sort of bombing Syrians. So I don't really think they should be playing a role, quite frankly. And I know that the current regime, the new regime, have been talking about whether is there some deal to be done with Russia, but I suspect from our perspective we would hope not, quite frankly, and that Syria would build itself up in a sort of more positive way than relying upon the partner which was helped with the destruction of the country.
That's very interesting. Let's talk a bit more on that. Andrei, I would like to give you the floor to answer if you have anything to say, especially because Donald Trump, who will take his office in a few weeks, promised to solve the conflict between Russia and Ukraine within a day, if it may happen. And of course, we should expect some geopolitical changes on the global arena between Washington and Moscow. Therefore, do you think that there is still a chance for two countries to work together when it comes to the issues related to the Middle East? Andrei?
Well, as the colleague has just mentioned, a lot will depend on the evolving situation in Ukraine. If any kind of compromise is found, at least temporary compromise, then cooperation would be possible and could be on a wider scale. If the war continues, it would be very hard to deal directly with Russia, even for the Trump administration. Trump made a huge reputational investment right now, promising to end the war very quickly, so he'll be pushing in this direction. But there are, kind of statements, goals in regard to Ukraine that are totally incompatible. I think that specifically, the issue of territorial losses of Ukraine is more or less settled, but there are two others that are very hard to deal with. The first of them is Ukraine's neutrality. I think nothing besides permanent neutrality of Ukraine would be acceptable to Putin. So Trump's offer to have a 10 years, for example, ban on joining NATO would be totally unacceptable for Putin. And the second one is Putin's desire to have constitutional and internationally backed guarantees to the Russian-speaking minorities in Ukraine. So there are some very serious problems in terms of reaching any kind of even temporary compromise. And ironically, now it also threatens the development of long-term cooperation between Western powers and Russia in Syria. Nevertheless, I think that the new Syrian leadership, ironically, would be interested in bringing in Russia simply as a way to counterbalance Western and to some extent Turkish influence as well. And considering the specifics of regional control by outside powers of Syrian territory and specifics of, political goals of particular groups, say Kurds, other groups within Syria, my guess is that even those who opposed Russia very strongly and who were directly bombed, for example, by Russian Air Force, they would be interested now in having Russia as a player, simply, I would repeat it, as a balancing mechanism.
Gökçe, the floor is yours. We see different approach of some Western powers, Western allies, and Russia to the situation in Syria. And taking into account the strong position of Turkey in the region and its intention to keep its presence in Syria, how exactly Ankara may balance its approach, staying in between of two fronts?
Yes, I see. It's a good question. Iran recently strongly protested the Assad regime's fall, and we know that Assad left at Russia's request. He explained that, and Turkey is an important player here because Turkey has good relations with Syrian opposition, with Russia, and also with the Western countries. Turkey tries to have good relations with the new regime and prevent any other catastrophe and other like narco-terrorism and other actions which are not appropriate with international humanitarian rights. And Turkey's position has increased, and Iran's influence has decreased. This is for sure, and this will so as a winner, as one of the winners of this situation, Turkey will try to be more supportive and will try to heal the wounds of the people, because Syria is now in this destruction. For example, Afad, Turkey's Afad has started search and rescue operations for the Sednaya prison and Assad's torture center, and so this is trying to build some balance and trying to heal the wounds of the people. As you know, since 2011, millions of Syrians had fled to Turkey, and Turkey tries to help them if they want to return as Syria, and also for its national interest. As I said earlier, there is a PKK problem in Syria. There was a Tusaş'tayı PKK terror attack in Ankara, and Turkey is regarding attentively this situation. So all Turkey desires in the region is a Syria strong, united, because a united, a strong Syria, and also with having good relations with Western countries and Syria, and also Russia.
Well, before I address my next question now, joining us from Israel is Galia Lindenstrauss, Senior Research Fellow, the Institute for National Security Studies, Tel Aviv University. We cannot ignore the presence of Israel forces in Syria. So, Galia, Israel's government has approved a plan to encourage the expansion of settlements in the Golan Heights. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the move was necessary because a new front had opened up on Israel's border with Syria after the fall of Assad's regime. Can we predict Israel's future actions in Syria?
I think Israel's actions towards Syria are mainly defensive. Israel is still unsure what will happen in Syria in the day after Assad, and it doesn't want, of course, to have any security threat from its from South Syria towards its northern border, towards its territory. Another interest for Israel is that Iran will not reuse Syria for the transfer of weapons to Hezbollah. Israel does not want to see Hezbollah rebuilding itself. Hezbollah has proven a very big enemy to Israel. And I think these two issues are Israel's main concern towards Syria. I think at the end of the day, Israel would want to see a united Syria, a Syria that doesn't harbor any terrorist elements. And I think this is actually a shared vision of many actors in the region, except perhaps Iran.
Well, the situation in Syria is quite unpredictable at the moment, but can Israel's action in these territories be considered a forced measure, and will the country withdraw from them as soon as the situation in Syria stabilized?
Yes, I think that territories that now Israel has reoccupied in the buffer zone between Israel and Syria, Israel has done this as a temporary measure until things clear out, until things are better. With regard to the Golan Heights, that's a different matter. This is something that Israel has negotiated with Syria over the years, but I don't think this will happen. Israel evacuation of the Golan Heights won't happen anytime soon because, again, Israel has very worried about the future of Syria and what it might entail.
Galia, with the world's attention now focused on the situation in Syria, some Western countries, including France, for example, criticized Israel's actions. What potential consequences could arise from this criticism, and how does Israel is planning to react on that?
Since October 7th, Israel has been involved in a multi-front war. We have been attacked by 7 different fronts. Israel has to maintain its security, has to keep its defense strong. It is open to international criticism when it's constructive in its voice towards ensuring the return of the hostages to Israel and ensuring that we will not see the resumption of attacks like we did on October 7th. When this criticism is not constructive, then of course Israel is less open to it. But with regard to Syria, I don't think Israel is in a contrary view to most actors in the international system. Israel also wants to see a stable Syria, a Syria that doesn't harbor any terrorists, a Syria that does not allow Iran to use its territory for transfer of weapons to Hezbollah. And I think this is, and for this, there needs to be reconstruction in Syria. There needs to be established an inclusive regime that is open to and take care of also minorities in the country. I think this is an interest that is shared by many, by Western actors, by moderate Sunni actors. I don't see there is a big contradiction here.
Well, James, if the situation in Syria continues to escalate, including the ongoing presence of Israel's forces, what reaction can we anticipate from the United Kingdom?
Well, I mean, we heard about Israel just now, but Israel isn't the only country that's been taking military action in Syria. Of course, Turkey has already, both its own armed forces and with its partners, has been attacking the Kurds, and the Americans have been attacking ISIS. So I think you have to look at it in the context is that all of these countries are taking immediate action to try to secure their own security interests. But what I would say is I don't think any of these things that have been happening really are threats to the new regime as such. As I say, they're just very narrow-based. It's a security interests that these countries are dealing with. So I think the bigger question is, what will happen with the new regime? And there, as I say, there've been some good signs. And I would also say, when you talk about escalating the situation, I'd say actually the situation is much, much better now for the time being than it has been for about the last 13 years, in that the Assad regime is gone, Iranian influence hopefully has been massively diminished, and the Syrian people can look forward to a bit of, sort of stability and hopefully peace. And yes, hopefully reconstruction, but still a lot of depends on the regime itself and what attitudes and what position it takes. But for the time being, at least, we can at least hope for a better future. And the UK, of course, will play its role in that. But the UK is just one of many actors, and we've heard about the other countries. Yes, we don't know what Trump will take, what view he'll take. I mean, he has previously said that he wants nothing to do with the place, and they should be left to their own devices. Let's see. I think Turkey is a very, very important player. We've heard about Turkey's objectives, and it seems to me, yes, they and also all European countries want a very stable and peaceful Syria, so refugees can be returned. But Turkey, on the other hand, also wants to eliminate what it sees as a Kurdish threat. So it has to reconcile those quite different interests, I think. And we've also talked about the Gulf states and the attitude they might take, because some of the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, have been involved in a number of disputes and conflicts in Africa and the Middle East in recent years. And so I think that time will tell. It's right to be hopeful, but be cautiously hopeful, and just plan for the best, I guess. But just bear in mind that things could go in the wrong direction. But I feel that it's a very positive step that we've got rid of the Assad regime, and it's now hopefully we can plan for the future.
So, James, additional question to you. Does it mean that the situation in Syria will attract more attention from the United Kingdom, also because it will have political and economic implications to the other countries in the Middle East?
It's attracted a lot of attention from the United Kingdom for many, many years. Let's be honest about it. We were talking about the £50 million that we've just announced, but I think we've given about £4 billion worth of aid since the uprising started in 2011. So it's been a huge financial commitment by the United Kingdom to support Syrians. Also, the refugee flows into the United Kingdom have been very, very high, as they have been into other countries in Europe. And of course, the instability that has come from Syria, whether it be Syria directly intervening in Lebanon or whether it be Iranian influence supporting Hezbollah, I think that Syria's been a mess, quite frankly, and exporting all sorts of bad things. And so, we have been interested. We will continue to stay interested, very much so. And hopefully, if the new regime, goes in the right direction, then of course we will want to support that. And I'm sure we'll want to support the reconstruction of the country to, hopefully, create more stability and security in the country for the people.
Andrei, Syria's de facto leader has said Israel has crossed the lines of engagement with its military actions inside the country following the toppling of the Assad regime. What are the potential consequences of this escalation?
Well, first of all, I want to say that we don't know yet whether the declarations of this new leader and leadership are going to be implemented. Do they have plans to implement them, first? Second, we don't know whether they have capacity to implement them and control their own forces. It will be visible very soon. Clearly, Israel is a big winner in this situation. It takes strategic advantage of it, so Israel moves in, creates an additional security zone already behind the Golan Heights, and it clearly would cause a lot of apprehension on the part of various players, including Turkey, by the way. So there would be resistance that would be coming not only from the new government in Damascus, but also from the major players. Yet Bibi gambled, went against practically everybody in the last year, and turned out to be a big winner. So I expect him to stay and establish new security zone. And it would lead to the consolidation of anti-Israel coalition, de facto coalition, in the region. And probably Turkey, after a while, would become a leader already of this new policy towards Israel.
Coach, unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I would like to hear your opinion as well about the position of Turkey on what's happening from the side of Israel in Syria.
Yes, as we all know, Turkey has some relations with Israel at the moment, but we all know that Iran's decreased influence in Syria helps the interest of both countries. But Turkish foreign minister recently criticized the possible occupation of Israel towards Golan Heights region in the south of Syria. But I believe this doesn't prevent any escalation in the region. I think the recent developments in Syria is in the interest of both of countries.
Dear expert, thank you so much for joining our program today. It was a real pleasure to know the opinion from different parts of the world. Thank you so much. And thank you, dear viewers, for following AnewZ and watching Inside Politics. Stay with us and see you in the next edition.